guys hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you good. Hold on one moment. Okay, we're ready to go.
Okay. So I call this meeting to order. Any modifications, additions to the agenda?
Let's see, Acting President Chapman. There are a couple, there's been a request to move 2 action items, as you know, A and B up to presentation and discussion. That's task order 11 with HDR and the Wisjani contract amendment. And then I point out that Paul Bandlow, Wisjani engineer, is on the call, and he's able to answer questions and participate in any discussion on that action item B. And then I'm not sure if he's there, but Mark Libby was also, engineer for HDR, was also going to join us to help answer questions on that point. And then the last one is I'd like to suggest a new agenda category for the meeting. So it would be, I recommend a new category 9 or subject 9, which would be an opportunity to identify any specific directives or actions that the commission has identified in the course of the meeting that are not an action item. This is something that Commissioner Fox has recommended as sort of a format. And this, I think, could be a good opportunity, one, to practice if there's a directive or if a commissioner has a suggestion that could be a directive, that we pause and clarify what that is, make sure that, in fact, the full commission agrees that that should be done. We clarify what the date is and what the specific action is. And then at the end of the meeting, under that new category, we just summarize or list or what those items are that might fit that sort of directive list. So perhaps we can practice tonight, and then this would be a recommended part of future commission meetings.
I like that idea.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. And I understand there's no public comment at this time.
None received.
Okay, and so then we're going to move to the consent agenda. If there's no discussion, can I get a motion, or does any commissioners have any concerns with consent? With that, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make an motion to accept the consent agenda as stated, and move to accept all these items.
Can I get a second? Okay. All in favor? Oh,
Aye.
discussion? None? Okay, no discussion, and chair aye. Okay, next is the informational reports. I understand we have the bridge replacement project update that everyone reviewed, and it's to my understanding that Kevin, is it true that you would like to clarify something with that informational report?
Yes, please, if I could. So I was asked at the last meeting, there was council or commission direction to modify the bridge replacement strategic plan. And one of the items that I was reviewing was the RFP process for the replacement bridge management contract. And I believe in that presentation and in the materials last month, there was a November date for propping up the replacement bridge management contract. And if the commission would allow, I'd like to bring up a schedule that I've been working on, trying to show some of the challenges with that. Let's see. Okay, so that you should be seeing an Excel spreadsheet called Bridge Replacement Strategy. replacement bridge management contract solicitation schedule. This is a discussion draft dated today. And on the left-hand side are the various tasks, subtasks, and then with corresponding date or range of dates on the right hand. And I worked with Steve Siegel to develop this. We independently kind of developed our own schedules and then compared where we came. And we both were in that April timeline for actually getting the RBMC contract executed and underway. And so that's a far cry from what was in the initial motion from last month. And so I wanted to bring this up just mainly because there's so many challenges regarding the agency review, getting a firm or a consultant to help develop the RFQ right when we are entering the asking the committee, the selection committee, to review proposals and interview potential firms. We're going to be right smack in the holiday period. And then the negotiations also are a lengthy process. So I bring this up to show we've got much more detailed versions of this, but I wanted to provide a roll-up to share with you staff's, I guess, not really, it's really a review of the direction that we were given last meeting. And just want to have a discussion or allow the commission an opportunity to discuss this. I do have a list of individuals that have RFQ preparation background and feel comfortable bringing a contract to the commission by that September 7th meeting so that they can begin that work. But as you can see, it's still a relatively lengthy process. And I can certainly go through each of these lines. And this is something that I've been working on over the last 2 weeks and was working on as recently as 10 minutes ago. So
Well, let me jump in, Kevin. This is Commissioner Fox. First off, this should go to the Bi-State Working Group before it comes to the Port Commission. I have not seen this at all before you drop this onto the commission. I don't think it's appropriate for us to be talking about this right now.
well,
I believe this, if you feel strongly about this, I think you need to, we'll put it on the Bi-State Working Group and we'll talk about it and then make a call off of that.
I think that's fine. I can certainly do that. We've got I should have a schedule for that special meeting, which would also be reviewing the WSP amendment for the preliminary cost estimate update. So we can certainly tack this on to that agenda as well, Commissioner Fox.
Good.
All right, so without going into too much detail, I just wanted to get that out there. And with that, I will stop sharing. And if there's any other questions about what was in the report, I will return it back over to the board.
Kevin, there was apparently one error in your report about the cables,
Mm-hmm.
the cost of the cables. You're not saying that those cables are going to cost $4 million.
No, I appreciate that clarification. And the one of the things that I'm looking to do is to try in my public updates to include more summaries of the work and repairs that are going on the current bridge, just to try to show the urgency on the huge amount of effort that's going into replacing the bridge.
And Kevin, I applaud that. That's what we, the direction that was given at the Bi-State Working Group. So I think that's good. We just got a little overzealous on how much it's going to cost, I hope. Although we don't really know yet.
To be determined. So absolutely, I think that's going to be a good addition to that monthly update, and that gets distributed all throughout the gorge in addition to our legislative folks and agency representatives. So it's a pretty widely dispersed.
So you've already dispersed it with the $4 million error?
It was dispersed to the Port Commission. It has not yet been distributed to those other agencies that I just referenced. So I can certainly make an update on that before it
I
gets distributed.
certainly hope you do.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Is there any other discussion that needs to happen over that, or can we move on to presentation and discussion items, which we are now going to be pulling the amendment with HDR Engineering for bridge weight limit live load testing.
Commissioner Chapman, I would recommend we go with the Wisjani contract amendment discussion first.
Okay,
Paul is
that's fine.
East Coast time and want to be sympathetic to that.
Perfect. Let's go to that.
So I would just, this was pulled up. This is coming back to you for the third time, and clearly there was an issue or questions that needed to be answered. So I defer to any commissioner that seeks more information or has questions about this item.
So we're talking about the load study?
No.
The Wisjani Engineering for bridge wire ropes replacement.
Okay.
Action item B.
Okay. So the comment that I had there is we were supposed to hear back what is the lead time on the cable, and I have not heard that. I didn't see it in the report.
Yeah, that's true. Paul is with us. Paul, we have what you sent me. We can pull up on the screen if you'd like, or you can just answer that question.
Yeah, either way. What we put out some requests for pricing on the ropes as well as lead times. And yeah, I think when we put out pricing or quotes, it's not as, they know that we're not buying this stuff. So I'll say take some of the stuff with a grain of salt, but the lead times came back from one company, I believe it was Wire Rope Works, and it was 14 to 16 weeks. The other company suggested a lead time of 45 weeks. So huge disparity in the lead time. Now this is the schedule that I put together for the shorter lead time, 14 to 16 weeks. And I put it together in two methods. One would be with normal procurement of the wire ropes, in which the contractor would procure the wire ropes, and then an alternate early procurement where the port would procure the wire ropes. And as you can see, there is a significant savings in time if the port were to procure the ropes. With the 16-week lead time, I believe it works out that this could be done sometime early to late spring of next year. Michael, if you want to put up the other schedule. So this is the long lead time, and the obvious distance is the long bar in about the middle of each of the graphs, and that is the 45-week lead time for the rope. So that substantially changes the picture with regard to when the work could be done, and likely that would push the work into 2023. Now we recently did a wire rope change out job with much bigger ropes and a lot more ropes, and that lead time was more consistent with the 14 to 16 week lead time. So we think that's doable, but at the same time, I think until somebody actually places an order and makes a commitment, that it might be pretty volatile out there in terms of material deliveries. The prices for the ropes were very consistent. I think they both came in around $90,000 for the ropes. So the ropes are relatively inexpensive. It's the installation is where the cost comes in.
So on all your schedules here, you have a notice to proceed to award a contract, a competitive contract of 4 months.
4 weeks.
Months.
Um,
And that the notice to proceed on your schedule, month 1,
All right,
2,
okay,
3, and
okay.
4.
right, that's right.
It's 4 months. I happen to agree with that. So Kevin, you need to take a look at your previous schedule and we need to figure out how to get it down earlier than that. So that's comment number 1. Comment number 2. So the earliest case that I see here is we would have new cables in place by month number 8 or start of month number 9. It's a 9-month project.
Well, if you early order the ropes, they would be in month 7.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Okay, so does that answer your questions, Commissioner Fox?
Yeah, the real question here is which one's the right lead time on this cable? Although it doesn't really impact us, to me, we've got to go out and award a contract, to get something in place.
Yeah, as I stated, we did a job that actually finished up this March or April of this year, and those ropes, I don't believe were ordered until late December, early January. And that job finished up by, I think about middle of May. So they got those ropes pretty quickly. And it was far more ropes. And again, they were bigger in diameter, longer in length, and more quantity. So we think the 14 to 16 week is not unreasonable. It's just that there's a lot of, as you probably know, there's a lot of volatility in almost all markets, consumer markets, industrial markets. It's so until somebody places the order, and I'll say even then, you hate to say who knows, but it's very, very difficult to predict.
So
that
so when you, just a procedural thing here, when you respool these cables, how do they do that? Do they need a barge and they're working from below? And if so, is there a period of time that we can't get in the water or they can't get in the water?
We would recommend that you do the work from the road deck, but that will require that the bridge is out of service for a period of time. Now, I did in the chart, I have basically one weekend, if you will, to do one end of the bridge and another weekend to do the other end of the bridge. We think it's possible to do the entire bridge in a weekend, or maybe a 3-day weekend, something like that. So
Okay.
that could be compressed, and then you avoid all of the water work. I think you take a lot of risk out of this. The one question I have, and I don't know, is John Mann still on? But the one question we had is if we, is the hoods up at the top of the tower, and whether we can get the new ropes under those shiv hoods. And if we can, that'll make things a lot easier. If we can't, getting those hoods out of the way, it's just a little bit, it's just extra work, and a question of how that gets done. But that would be done ahead of any closure work. So I don't know that it's the end of the world. It just needs to be figured out.
Yeah, Paul, what I want to go look at is the access below the hoods to see if there's a way to bring those cables up between the frame.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll take a climb tomorrow and take a look at that. But worst case, those hoods are heavy, but I think like 4 or 5 of us can manhandle those off. If that had to happen, that's not that big a deal. We could be ready well ahead of the contractor for that work.
Yeah, okay, well, either that or, whether you do it or the contractor does it, but it would be nice if there was enough room under the hoods to be able to pull the ropes off without, without removing the hoods, just picking them up slightly, but there needs to be enough clearance for the socket to clear between the sheave and the hood. And, sometimes, I just don't know how closely they fit. And I think we may have the drawings for those. We might be able to figure it out, from the drawings, but it's always better to field verify something like that.
I know
So, Paul-
exactly what you're looking for, and we'll get you some measurements, Paul.
Okay.
So either Paul or John, the plan would be to put a tugger up on the deck. And
A tugger up on the approach and then
Yeah.
run a cable up over the sheave and then simply pull the ropes up over the sheave from the roadway. Lay all the ropes out on the roadway on plywood so that they don't get dirt or grit in them, and then
Okay.
and put them in place. And then jacking the bridge, whether we actually jack the counterweight or jack the movable span, we'll have to look at that and see what the best option is there.
Okay, last question for you. Do you have any guesstimate of what the installation cost is going to be?
Yeah, what we talked about early on, we think it's something like the whole project is probably in the range of $1 million to $1.5 million, which I don't know. We're certainly not professional estimators, and generally when we look at things, we have trouble coming up with the numbers that contractors come up with. But
Okay. And the second to the last question,
sure.
how many bidders do you expect to go after this?
In that area, it's really tough. I mean, if it were in Portland, I think you'd definitely have, there'd be probably several people who would go after it. Out in Hood River, I guess, I don't know for sure. It's not that long of a project. It does require some planning. It requires, some know-how. So, you may only get 1 or 2 bidders.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Michael, do you have anything else for me?
No, I don't. I just would suggest to the commission or to Commissioner Chapman, the commission can take action on this now, or you can drop it back down to action if you'd like.
Commissioner Chapman, I'm okay with proceeding on this.
Okay, so we can just drop it back into action items and
Well, you
and
could
vote on it in just a little bit, or do you want to do it now?
seek a vote right now since this is actionable.
Okay, so I guess, can I get a motion for approve amendment number 2 to contract with Janie Engineering for bridge wire ropes replacement?
I'll make that motion and proceed to getting a contract package put together, go out for bid, and negotiate and award an installation contract.
Can I get a second?
A second?
Is there any discussion?
Did
Without
you
discussion?
want to, one question, did you
Oh,
want to
go ahead.
include the staff recommended not to exceed amount in your motion?
Well, the suggestion here is that the proposal that was presented, we accept that with a not to exceed on that
Uh-huh.
value. But as far as the competitive bid, it's going to be whatever we end up selecting.
Yeah, that'll be a separate action.
Right. Okay.
Yes, not to exceed $83,720 plus reasonable reimbursement expenses.
I so motion.
Okay, no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
I think you're muted, Mr. Commissioner Fox.
No other motion.
Okay. And then so Chair I passes.
Aye.
Okay, and so discussion item regarding HDR engineering for bridge weight limit live load testing. I believe,
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate that. Appreciate the confidence in us to continue helping you folks. And, you know, we will do our best to make sure this project is a success. So thank you and have a good evening.
Thanks,
Thank
Paul.
you, Paul.
Welcome.
thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Bye.
So I believe Commissioner Fox was the one that wanted to pull action item A for the bridge weight limit live load testing. So were you able to receive the materials that you were interested in already, or does
No, I
someone
still have some follow-on questions. And I think we should pull this one. I'd like to talk to legal and his interpretation. I'd like to see his interpretation of Oregon law. I read through it this afternoon and I can't seem to find it. And this is on the competitive bidding. So that's one issue. The second issue, as I remember the last meeting, the contractor made a point of saying that they would have equipment associated with NDT on standby, and they would be looking at the local condition. And if they found a joint or a member that looked like it has significant cracking, they would come to us, get authorization quickly to do magnetic testing or NDT on that particular joint. When I looked at the document, all of that now is gone. It does not exist anymore in the document. And I think we ought to rethink that, and that we're down there looking at it. I think that capability needs to be ready to go should we need it.
So,
does staff have anything?
yeah, on that second point, Commissioner Fox, Mark Libby is with us, and I'm not an engineer. I won't speak for him, but he does. He will have the capability for dye penetrant and mag particle testing.
Well, that's part of NDT.
That's what I'm saying. Yes, there are other interventions that involve NDT, not just those two. So what Mark has clarified is they will have staff there that and the equipment to intervene with those particular forms of NDT during the operation. But to be clear, their operation is focused on putting together the instrumentation for the live load testing. So they will look around on those members that they're near and will certainly notice it and identify an anomaly if it exists. And they will have that capability on site during that operation.
Okay, so what I'm really interested to hear is that the live load testing is one thing, but I am very concerned about taking the load back up on that bridge and we have a failure later on because we missed something. I'm very concerned about that. So everybody be careful here.
Well, I'll defer to Mark. I will point out that the fracture critical inspection, which had an arm's length review of everything, every steel member, was conducted less than a year ago. So it's.
But when you read the report, there's several of those members that had failure numbers of somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think the lowest one I saw was 0.46. A lot of them in the 0.5, 0.6, 0.7 range. And when I asked the question, how do you interpret that? And it is somewhat subjective, but it's pretty consistent. If you have a load factor of 0.7, that generally means that you have a degradation of the load rating of about 30%. And the engineers on the meeting confirmed that. So when we have a load factor down at 0.47 or 0.5 or so on, it makes me very nervous that we're going to look at increasing the loads and not really understanding what's going on in those joints.
Well,
other than the strain gauge.
Let me defer to Mark on that point. You looked at the both the fracture critical and you've done some work, obviously, on the weight limit reduction. What do you suggest?
Well, I'll refer to, in the load rating analysis, any of the rating factors that are that low are generally under two different categories that don't apply to the load-based testing or to the load posting. So they tend to be either a longitudinal reinforcement check in concrete, which is a code check, but it's not a strength assessment. And then on the trusses, there's a variety of ones too that aren't applicable. So those don't show up in our summary of things that really are affecting the posting. So we are not doing an inspection project. But the people doing the installation and the instrumentation, and I verified with them that they can bring their equipment and have personnel trained for NDT. Generally on bridge inspections, it's either dye penetrant or mag particle that would apply should cracks be encountered. Now, before they get out there, I'll give them a summary from the inspection reports of any known defects on any of the members that we're going to be at. So, but on this bridge, particularly the riveted connections, the gusset plates, pretty unlikely. There's very few cracks initiated in those members. They tend to be in the floor beams where there's a knee brace connection to the web of the floor beams. That's where most of them have been found in the past. Also, the exterior stringers that have the guardrail posts welded to them, those tend to generate cracks. A lot of those have been addressed or repaired in the recent past.
Okay, so Mark,
Yes,
so if some of the floor beams and the joist for the floor beams are showing these cracks in the lower numbers, should we not be looking at those as well if we're trying to do a load study? If we're going to increase the weight limit of this bridge back up to 80,000 pounds, those joints are going to take additional load, are they not? And what happens if they fail?
well, those, the cracks that we've detected and that we've repaired numerous ones of are not of the nature that are likely to result in any sort of catastrophic failure. What happens is they slowly propagate with time in a connection. So I'm pretty sure that we have addressed all the known ones. We've done a couple of projects that have repaired those crack findings in the past. So I can't say with certainty that there's none current, but I'm pretty certain. I haven't verified that. But
So,
I'm pretty
why,
sure.
so why does the current report still show a number of these joints and members having load factors of 0.5, 0.6, 0.65 if they've been repaired?
Well, those aren't related to a crack. Those aren't reduced because of the presence of a crack. So those are an analytical assessment. The service tube flexure is one of the criteria. That would, on the truss spans, that would tend to be where you would get the low rating factors. I'm trying to flip there to find some of the ones that you were likely picking up on. So, but in the report that we submitted, we kind of highlighted color coded sort of the ones that aren't really applicable. Yes, there is a lower rating factor assigned to that, but it's not a structural assessment. And so I would have to kind of identify specific ones, but generally anything that's going to be that low, or the other category that would be that low would be the design load, not one of the legal trucks. So the HL93 load is generally going to be rated very low. because this bridge wasn't designed for that heavy of a load. But
Right.
that's not considered for load posting, the design load. It's the legal trucks, the type 3s down through the SU 4 through 7 trucks that are getting applied. These emergency vehicle EV2 and 3 trucks are being added, and ODOT has notified the port that they'll be issuing another letter come this fall.
Right.
About we've already taken those into consideration and looking through this because we knew it was coming. And so those are the categories. And if you look in our summary table, let me just look at that. I believe the lowest factor we were reporting in there on the trusses was 0.74 was a tension on a gusset plate. Looks to be the lowest number for the trusses. So there are some of those other very low numbers, but they're not a structural assessment. So the load, they're not considered as what would restrict the load. And
Okay,
I would have to get into a lot more detail, I guess, to explain why and what the particular code and look up that reference. I'm more familiar with the like the longitudinal reinforcement one on the concrete structures. That was something added here recently, has to do with the modified compression field theory and on shear reinforcement. And it's important and it adds the shear capacity, but it's not a direct structural deficiency. It's a code check deficiency, if that makes sense.
all right, I'll stand by to your knowledge. I just hope you're right.
There's another fracture critical inspection coming next year, every 2 years. It gets looked at, and we monitor and respond to the findings of those inspections. And, and then we go out and do repair projects as needed and warranted by those.
Okay. So the second question that I had dealt with awarding a sole source contract. And I think legal looked at it and quoted a section of the law. When I read through it, I can't find it, what I was asking. So I think we hold this off for one more time. I'll get with legal in the next day or two and get them to show me, and let's have a quick discussion. And then I'm good with proceeding.
Commissioner Fox, I prepared that analysis. If there's something I can answer for you now in order to save the time for the commission, I'd be happy to do so, if that's acceptable to you, Jerry.
Sure.
And you, Michael.
Absolutely.
The concern that I've got here is that this is a pretty substantial increase to the contract to the tune of it's greater than $250,000. Okay, so legally we can take a consultant contract and they can award a sole source contract for in excess of $250,000, and we don't have to do competitive bidding. And especially since this is not an emergency condition. And when I looked at it, it was fuzzy to me. I saw a couple of different sections in there on $100,000 or less. And I think there was one in there for $250,000 and less, and this is over both of those.
Great.
The sub-consultants portion is 193,670.
Yes, thank you. The analysis I performed was based on the $193,000 amount, which is below the $250,000 threshold. I also found that this to be under related services provision of ORS 279C 100 subsection 8. So I think that it is underneath the threshold for this particular portion. I also reviewed the contract to be sure that it is within the contractors or the consultants' authority to hire a sub-consultant, and it is. So I think that, that because my conclusion was that because the amount for this particular subcontract, which is a related service, is below the $250,000 threshold, it is exempt from the need for a competitive bid procedure. And it's my understanding too that the award of the contract to HDR in the first place was performed under competitive bid. And so this, I think, the analysis I performed, this is in the clear. And I'd be happy to provide you that statute if you'd like me to send it to you, Commissioner.
No, I've
Fox.
got it. I wrote it down and,
Okay.
and I read through it. So then the question really becomes, can we get a better price if we go out for bid? Yeah, we're spending port money here. It's as far as I'm concerned, it is not an emergency. We don't have to do this. This is a nice thing to do. And maybe we get lucky and it shows that we don't have to spend a bunch more money to beef up the structure to allow us to get the loads increased back up. But with that said, we're spending $200,000 to go do this, and that doesn't even include any follow-on work. So I think the question that we need to debate is, can we get a better price if we go out for competitive bid? This is not time critical.
Mark, how would you, what's the universe of entities that perform this sort of instrumentation and analysis?
I'd have to consult with some others on recommendations of who to go to. I know there's other firms that do it. None that I've heard recommended as highly as BDI. So I'd have to look into that a little bit more. But we've got some folks that deal with it quite a bit on the East Coast that I'd reach out to for their suggestions. So as I mentioned, whenever I do bring them up, that the response has always been, you're on the right path with them. They're very reasonable on their cost, their instrumentation. It's a specialty of what they do, and they're very good at it. And so it's possible that you could save a little bit. Quality might be comparable. It would be a little more difficult to kind of evaluate that without having some good experience with other firms.
So
I'd
Mark,
have to look into
if we sought additional quotes for this sub work, how long do you think that might take to do? Could it be done in a week or a week and a half or so, or longer?
No, we would have to put together a solicitation, get it reviewed by your staff and legal, get that coordinated, then put it out for solicitation. You couldn't get the work done till next spring. We're pushing it as it is with the season.
Yeah, that was my second question. So this work really needs to take place in reasonable weather conditions. If we get too far into the winter, it's less feasible or not feasible.
Yeah, I mean, if it gets a little bit wet, I mean, we're already looking, and probably, it's going to be the second half of October, probably. I'm not sure they can make the first half. If we delay further, then that might be jeopardized. I mean, they can still operate and do some things in wet conditions, but the further out we get, the winds start increasing or weather gets worse, it's just more challenging.
So just for the commissioners to the basic schedule that I laid out and communicated to the trucking companies and loggers and such that are, and the farmers that are real interested in this, was that we would try to bring back to the commission the feasibility work and essentially a recommendation about whether it is feasible to restore the 80K weight limit or not, but that we would have that back to the commission for consideration in by the end of the year. And so I would just point out the consideration here is between the possibility of obtaining maybe a slightly better price or getting this work done so that we can call the question about whether it's possible to get back to 80K or whether we just have to tell people that this is the limit going forward. So
Michael, I'd add,
time sensitive.
I'd add to that, Michael, that we think for most of it, very high likelihood, the outliers would be this EV3 truck, and also under the other legal categories, the SU7 is also a very heavy load, but we don't think those are really a particularly good fit of your customer base that would be affected. And so, so there's one of the opportunities for some of the aspects that might still require repair. We could then have the information to choose whether or not a lower effort of repair is warranted, less costly perhaps, or allowing those trucks to be posted, because it's not going to affect your commercial fruit haulers, or I don't think your logging trucks either. Have to compare. And that might be something we just need to evaluate better with the data that you get off of your stuff about the larger vehicles that do cross.
So are you saying that the fully loaded logging trucks probably isn't going to pass muster with this?
No, I think it would. They're generally, I think, under the loads that are currently permitted prior to this.
The 80,000,
this
the equivalent
restriction.
80,000 pound.
Sometimes they may exceed the 80,000 pounds, but they're generally not in that category of the the higher additional number of axles and gross.
Well, what I'll tell you, Commissioner Chapman, what I would suggest we do is let Mark do a little bit of research, and for the next meeting, when we have a full quorum, we bring this back, and if he can show that we can get 2 or 3 or 4 competitive bids, then we talk about it. Maybe we select, okay, good enough, let's go. But I think we need to think about this one just a little more. Again, this is not time sensitive. It's not, if anything, I would have said, let's get on with it with the wire ropes. This is not a wire rope issue.
So with that, I would suggest, because we only have 3 tonight for our quorum, that, I do think that this point is really important for a small sector of people, but the small sector of people that it is important to rely heavily on moving goods and services over the bridge. And so I do think, whereas it's not time sensitive, it's not critical, but it's highly important for very small industries. So I do want to get this moved through appropriately and as quickly as possible. But knowing that Commissioner Fox would like more information, I guess my suggestion would be that we would probably need to table this until our next meeting. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
I'd rather table it than have a no vote.
Right.
Is what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Just, if I could, just a clarification from Mark, what I heard you say, Mark, is that we're pushing it already, so that it's likely that this work would have to be done in springtime. Or it's possible they would have to shift this work forward into next year.
Yeah, if it is, I'll have to check, every couple of weeks that pass, other work is booked and windows of opportunity are lost. So we can't guarantee that they could still meet that time frame if we delay a couple of weeks. So I'll have to ask. And
Mark,
I could
Mark,
look into other. Yep. Yes,
is
ma'am.
there a way to, without going through a formal RFP process or a formal bid process, is there a way that you could get interest from other companies? And if there's not, maybe that answers our question. Like if there's no interest from other people on the timeline that this company is able to perform, maybe all of this is a moot point.
Yeah, I was thinking if I followed the same sort of process of reach out to them, give them an explanation of the scope. I mean, this firm has put a fair amount of time into developing their proposal and working with us about how to go about doing what we're requesting. So I would need to then also relay that information to another firm to get a solicitation from them. And so we could do that in lieu of putting together a formal proposal that was, and so then it's just sort of getting price quotes from 2 or 3 firms. So that from a time standpoint, that would be the quickest way to do it. It was potentially a little unfair to the firm that has been putting that information together for us because it wasn't competitive for them from the get-go. But so I'll reach out to some of the folks in our company that would know the other players and get
Mark,
some
I would
information.
appreciate you doing that. Okay, and the other thought that I've had, and I know you've attempted to address it in the past. Now, once you have this data, it has to go to ODOT? Who does it go to?
Yeah, we still have to coordinate with ODOT about the implementation and the updating of the official load rating. So that's
Okay,
that's a stamped document, right?
Could you explain that process a little bit for me? So once you have the data, what is it going to take? Who's going to have to review it to say, yes, we can go back up?
Yeah, so what BDI is going to be providing is they will have load rating analysis for the girder spans. So the 2-span steel girder approach on Oregon and the concrete ones there. On the truss spans, they will provide that for the floor beams. I believe they're going to develop sort of what the distribution of the floor system is from the stringers. They would provide us loads to the truss members. We would do the analysis for the gusset plate rating based on those member loads. And then we still have to, and I've reached out to them to clarify. So we kind of shifted when we discovered that the span 19 truss had some tension tie rods added to the bottom cord. We did some analysis on that based on what the firm that did the load rating used, using their files. We added those forces in, and it did not make the top cord compression deficiency go away. So they seemed fairly ineffective. They were effective on the bottom cord. It's a fairly crude 2D analysis. And so I think we have to, I'm a little suspect about it being as ineffective as that showed it to be. So I think we would need to do more analysis on that truss. And then reaching out to BDI to find out, will I be able to use your floor system distribution information from span 3 or 4 to apply to span 19? So span 19, the deck widens as it approaches the concrete spans. And so that widening changes the distribution factor. The live load doesn't really change, right? If you still only have 2 lanes, You can only have 2 trucks in there. But the position of the trucks are a little different. And so that has some outcome. So load ratings are generally pretty conservative assessments. And that's why the load testing is expected to be quite effective, because the truss redistributes forces far better than our analytical tools assess it to be, using simple methods. If you're actually doing 3D models of the truss, you would get more refined analysis, but load ratings usually don't go to that effort because it's very expensive and time consuming.
Okay, so up until this point, all that you said is included in this amendment cost, correct?
Yes,
Okay, so we would not expect to see any cost adjustment for any going back and forth between you and BDI and trying to resolve issues because it's already in the numbers.
they've already got analysis. They will already be building models of the trusses to analyze the forces that come
Okay,
through from what they're collecting. And they will have very good information about how the forces are distributing through the trusses.
okay, so you got this great report, shows all of this movement and loads and whatnot. Then what?
So then we'll coordinate that back with ODOT on the girder spans. The basic will have a load rating report. They will have to evaluate whether or not do they take that as it is, or do they then have the firm that did the load rating revise the load rating report. And so I haven't fully had those discussions with them yet about the how, but we've been talking. I've shared with them the proposal to see if they had comments on the approach. I said I can't get any closer on the detailed like instrumentation plan because they're doing this all on overhead at this point. But once they have them under contract, then we would expect to provide an instrumentation plan that we would share with ODOT, and Steve Lovejoy would be very interested in looking at it. He's one of the guys at ODOT's bridge section that is involved a lot of times with instrumentation and load test scenarios and has a lot of expertise in steel.
Okay, so he's going to be looking at methodology, data points to see if he agrees with that. So now you've got the results. He could still reject all of this.
Potentially. So that would be, they would have to have really good reason. And they would have to be able to demonstrate there was something done wrong or poorly, which is one of the reasons why really using this company.
Okay, so
a lot of types of reputation and quality.
So as the results of the test and the analysis
and the analysis,
you could come back and say, we need to strengthen these members, these areas, correct? To be able to accept the load?
That's correct.
Okay, and we're not going to know that. Who will determine that step? Will that be you guys or BDI or both?
Yeah, it'd be
Or
a
will it be
combination.
ODOT?
The report that we would put together would identify the results and the outcome, which elements were shown to improve more than the needed amount to eliminate the load reduction, and some may not. So like the Oregon approach spans, those are probably the most likely to still have a problem. So we don't know. The truss issues, I don't expect there. I really would be surprised if there's residual problems on those based on the load rating factors and the types of scenarios. So I think that's fairly, I mean, if it wasn't a high likelihood, we would be more inclined to just recommend repairs. But the repairs did involve a lot of locations and a lot higher cost. I forget what the magnitude of it is, but it's way, the number of locations on the trusses is it's at least 4 gusset plates on every truss would have to be strengthened. So times what, 18 truss bands.
That would probably be a no-brainer. Don't do it.
It's very large, right? So the cost is high.
All right. So I'll back off here. Christie, if you want to proceed with this, again, we're spending $250,000, no competitive bid. I got a little problem with that, but I understand where we are. So I'm okay going ahead with a vote if you would like to do that.
Okay, well, I'm just getting to the 51, sorry. I have some angry children here. So I apologize. Let me get to that page really quick.
51.
51, thank you. Okay, so would anybody like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion. We approve amendment number 2, task order 11 of the master service agreement with HDR for engineering service associated with the live load testing and weight limit restoration feasibility. We have a not to exceed number that was included in the quote for both BDI as well as HDR. And I so move.
Can I get a second?
A second.
Any discussion? No discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Chair I passes. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate the additional information and clarification.
Thanks, Mark.
Hey, thank you. And Michael and commissioners, I'll follow up with some folks in our company as well and get back to Michael with a summary of what kind of their assessment of the capabilities of other firms as well is, just to kind of close the loop on that.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, so next item is Executive Director's Report. Michael.
Yeah, it's a short report, but let me highlight a few things. As you probably know, the governor issued a new mandate for outdoor masking, even for vaccinated people. So we, of course, goes into effect on Friday. I don't think that'll affect us much in terms of our operations, but that's something we have to think through in various aspects of our operations. There is a question, though, and I guess it's yet to be determined whether these upcoming major events, the Kiteboarding for Cancer and Harvest Fest, whether that will have an impact on those events. So this was, I guess, breaking today, so we'll have to circle back on that. I've been invited to participate in the city manager interviews. Those will take place for about a half a day on September 8th. There's 4 candidates. You've probably seen them in the paper. I want to just give my compliments and a shout out to Daryl and John and the facility staff. We passed it's in my report, but we passed our Clean Marina inspection. And that's kind of a big deal. We're proud of our marina. We're proud to be part of that program and maintain that clean marina status. It means that we're following a number of protocols. We're never perfect. There's always something to point it out, but in general, it's been handled very well, and it was an excellent report. Good news, but shockingly, we will have a shorter time frame for the completion of the front office renovation project. John's Man reported today that there was a nice coincidence with the materials delivery and the availability of the contractor, so that we hope to have that done by the end of next week. And then finally, well, two more things. I wanted to just focus briefly on the monthly report from TAC Aero that's included, attached to my report. This is a function of the FBO agreement that the commission approved, which had very specific reporting requirements and timing for those reporting requirements, meaning monthly. And I would ask the commission to look at this report. It's the first version of it. I've worked with TAC Aero on the different component pieces and the layout and such. It certainly could be improved, or there may be other ways to look at it. But I would ask for any comments and feedback, not necessarily now, but at some point, if you think this is sufficient from the standpoint of communication back to the commission. And then specifically, I wanted to point out the airport activity, the very first heading on the first page. Now, this is, as we talked about at the work session, airport work session, there was a question about how we can monitor, how we can quantify the number of activity, the level of activity, the number of air operations that occur up there. And what this represents is the FlightAware app, which is publicly available, and it's a way to describe the activity or quantify the activity at particular airfields. But it's important to note that these are real estimates, because if you remember that discussion, there's ADS-B transponders, which are in many planes, but not all planes. The ones that have those transponders are the ones that can be tracked on FlightAware. So this is still an estimate. The question really is to what extent the quantities here, the numbers that we can derive from FlightAware, what percentage of the air activity does it capture? And I've received various answers on that, somewhere between 90% and 75% or so. But it is an issue that we talked about at the AAC meeting last week, and the advisory committee had some, I think, some pretty interesting recommendations to do some intervention with some technology that doesn't cost a lot, but can help at minimum verify the extent to which the FlightAware data captures the full activity at the airfield. So we'll be able to report back more on that, but it's important when you see these numbers to know that they aren't necessarily firm, and we're going to try to find ways to be more confident in the numbers.
I would. This is Mike. I like the report. I've read all the way through the report. I think it's a very good start. I would encourage the commissioner and the airport commission to think about this report, about how are we going to use it to do something. It's great to collect data, but if you're not using the data to do something, then it's kind of a wasted effort. So knowing the flights in and out are great, kind of neat to know, but how are we going to use that to do something? And you can create all kinds of metrics, but if you're not going to use it for anything, you just wasted somebody's time. So I'm for it, but I think we need to take that next step. There was a comment that I made to you, Michael, on this report, where down below it shows some inspections where there's some weed killing and there's a dirty hangar and some other stuff. And I was surprised that the FBO is not responsible for maintaining the airport. Why? Why aren't they responsible for it? We didn't put it in their scope.
Well, it's never been done, and they don't have the equipment. They don't have the expertise. Our facilities crews they do. So there are ways in which we could add to the scope of work for the FBO. And I think on some level, they might be interested in some activities, maintenance type activities, but this is a responsibility we have as the airport owner to keep it maintained. The comments they made here, if I can, yeah, so the hangar, generally what these comments relate to are what our facilities are. So it's a question that's certainly worth asking and worth having some more discussion about. If we ask them to take on additional work, certainly they would have to have the right equipment, the right expertise, and we would have to have an agreement with them that allocates liability. But certainly we could explore that if the commission wants.
Well, I think this whole thing needs to be looked at. If we're trying to get to at least cost neutral on the airport, every place we're spending money, we need to be thinking about it. And especially if we've got an FBO that is a no cost contract, how are they making money? So we don't have to solve it today, but this is one of the uses for a report like this that, hey, why are we doing this? How can we shift it? How can we reduce cost? If that's what we're going to do, or how do we get that revenue back that we're spending? So don't need to solve it today, but that's one of the purposes of these reports.
Commissioner Fox, one suggestion I have, I think I've made it to the commission, is to bring the FBO in and have a discussion with the commission. And if it was an executive session, I think you could learn more about what their business model is, how their FBO business relates to their technology and oversight business. And questions like this can be raised. I would suggest that because I think there's sort of a gulf between the commission's understanding of what the FBO does and the FBO. So I think improving that understanding and communication is inherent to any of these sort of ideas.
I'm fine with that.
Good. Thank you. Last thing, I just reiterate the Cascade Locks looks like they're going to 11 ton for several weeks, and with the work going on the Dalles Bridge, that potentially could drive additional truck traffic across our bridge. It's a short period of time, but oftentimes, I don't know the work involved in the Bridge of the Gods, but oftentimes this can take an extended time to fix. That's just, it's not unusual to have more traffic diverted, something we'll just have to anticipate. That's my report. If there are any other questions, I'm glad to answer them.
Well, I'll defer to Commissioner Gehrig and Commissioner Strike, but I really love the report. It's neat to see some numbers and usage and stuff we can start showing the public. So I think it's great that we're starting to collect this.
Thank you.
Does anybody have anything else for Michael? If not, then we will move to Commissioner Committee reports. It sounds like we just have Airport Advisory Committee. Commissioner Gehrig, do you have anything that you'd like to report on?
I wasn't able to attend. Michael, I believe, was the only one representing the port.
Okay, Michael,
Anything? He was there.
And we knew Commissioner Gehrig let us all know that she would not be able to attend. But let me defer to Greg, who is taking on additional roles and responsibilities at the airport for a quick summary.
Good evening, everyone. So as we talked about, the Airport Advisory Committee that met on Thursday, August 19th, three main subjects were discussed, two of those occupying most of the conversation. First being ground leasing. If I can summarize some of the sentiment shared by the group, it solves a high demand within our pilot community for additional hangar space. Ownership of structure and land provide the greatest revenue potential and amount of control over the tenants. Ground leases provide opportunities to create revenue for the port with no capital requirement. Lease structure can mitigate many of the concerns about losing control through restrictive covenants like maintenance requirements, termination clauses, restrictions on subletting. And ultimately, the topic, it's meant to receive another round of discussion with the next AAC meeting. And the hope is to bring or develop a draft recommendation for submission to the commission. Second topic, airport operations data, getting right back into it. The general question was asked, what is the objective? 4 general targets were offered. There's quite a few, but how many planes take off and land? What type of aircraft use the airport? Who is using the airport, private or commercial? And how long do they stay? So the thought is, with that information, we can start to extrapolate some ways of studying future developments or whatever the purpose is regarding that collection. Furthermore, the strengths and weaknesses of the two operational data tracking programs that staff recently reviewed, Victor and Invictus respectively, were discussed. Both of those coming with a price tag around $60,000 to $65,000 with additional recurring costs. Committee Chair Dave Covell suggested conducting a preliminary experiment using a combination of FlightAware, which Michael already explained, and a game camera. So apparently the port recently purchased a year's worth of flight data from FlightAware. So this information, albeit ADS-B reliant, in conjunction with a game camera, can then give us a clear indication of who's using our airfield. Committee Chair and Chris Roebuck volunteered to conduct this experiment on the port's behalf, and the commission should expect a formal recommendation to allow pursuance of this experiment in the next AAC meeting, after the next AAC meeting, excuse me. Third one being the SDS hangar transfer. Brief explanation of the transfer from SDS to WAM with clarification that the port would like to purchase the hangar, but that is something that WAM and the port are still in negotiations over. Other items were fly-friendly program could benefit from a revision to ensure that it is impactful as possible. Apparently, some of the verbiage does not correlate to as strong of guidance as some would like. And then lastly was Life Flight is no longer using Friendship Park for evacs, and they've begun to use the North Apron for said operations. No stakeholder updates, and that's pretty much the brief on the AAC.
Very good. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Greg. There's one other committee report. I did attend my first Visit Hood River meeting, and that was really good. I think that the biggest takeaways that I got from that is that everyone had a fantastic July, and August has been a major downturn. And you know, there was discussions of the two heat waves, and so everyone is just having kind of this more deflated sense. Businesses and hotel operators are having a deflated feeling going into the off season because their August were not as robust as they anticipated them to be. And there was a big consensus of just kind of deflated employees, it was kind of, I think the word grim was used often. So that is kind of the sentiment of Visit Hood River. There was talk about how to drive tourism in on the shoulder season, so this upcoming fall and winter season. And I did bring up to them about Commissioner Strike's comment of helping airport users get around town. And a lot of the hotel operators and tourist-based industries got really excited about furthering that. And so I told them that probably the best people that they should get it in touch with would be TAC Aero, specifically as our FBO. So that was about it. Yeah, that's all I have to report from them. Okay, so moving on, do we have any other commissioner committee reports? If not, I will move to action items. We've already done A and B, and so we can move to action item C. If there's any discussion that needs to be talked about with that one, or if not.
Yeah, I've got a comment on that one. Heather, I don't know if you have taken a look at the recommendation for award and also gone back to the bid evaluation scoring card.
I looked at it a while ago. I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to right now.
Okay, so
scoring card.
the the competition ended up to be pretty close between
Okay.
the two companies. When I looked at the scoring matrix, there's a little bit of an anomaly there that I believe somebody ought to look at and then make the decision. And I think you and Hobie ought to take a hard look at it. And where it is there was 5 voters, if you will, or evaluators to the bids. And all 5 scored between, depending on the weight. And 4 of the 5 were very close in their scoring of each individual element. There was one that scored much, much different and had a much broader scoring to it, which really had a major impact on the total score. And I think somebody needs to look at that to make sure that if the individual would have scored in a similar fashion, would it change the outcome? Now, what I did is I took the one score totally out and it switches the scoring. It switches the recommendation. But I would encourage you to take a look at that. And you and Hobie talk it over. And if you guys are satisfied with it, I'm satisfied with it. But it just looks suspicious, not suspicious. It looks like it's unfair to me.
Okay, do you remember what the one item was?
Yeah,
that had-
it's John. Look at John's
Okay.
scores all the way across. He had
Okay.
a much bigger spread than anybody else. And when you run it through the calculation, it has a significant impact than anybody else.
Okay,
So I think if you look at that, you may want to go back to John and have a discussion.
okay,
It may not change it, but it just looks unfair to me. Now, if you guys have already talked about it, I'm fine, but it just looks strange.
Commissioner Fox, if I could, the selection committee or evaluation committee met, so everyone is in the same room. It's probably not appropriate to bring in another commissioner to discuss the scoring or or consider changing the scoring. John's scores were what they were. The committee came together at Hobie's request, met for an hour and a half, and the results are what they are. So I think to be true to the process, I think we have to respect the outcome. In my opinion, and my recommendation would be the numeric scoring is it's very, very close, but the group felt together that was the right choice. So
Okay, so if you want to have a vote tonight, I'm going to say no.
Committee that was set up by the commission to do this work.
Okay, so what I would like to do is chair this. I'd like to talk to Hobie. I don't think, Heather, were you involved in that final discussion?
no, I was not.
Okay, so I want to talk to Hobie and make sure that he understands what he sees. This could be a potential protest area.
Commissioner Fox, I can let you know that because this was airport related and I knew that Hobie was involved in the committee, I did reach out to Michael to make sure that Hobie was comfortable having this be an action item when he knew that he was not going to be available, and he didn't have any objections.
Okay, I'm just concerned, and I'd like to talk to Hobie as he looked at this, because I've gone through many of these contracts in my past. This is a protest bait. If one of the contractors saw this, they would question why.
Commissioner Fox, just for clarity, the Century West has been the airport engineer for at least 15 years, probably 20. So this certainly was a change that they were not pleased with. So they reached out and I shared with them the scoring sheets. I shared with them the comments that were made, and so they are fully aware of it. And if there was a protest, they're well past a protest period.
So you've already talked to these people without approval of award from the commission?
Yes, I have to. If you disagree with that, let me know. But after the completion of the scoring is over, generally people want to know how they did. It's still subject to commission approval. So it's not definitive, but it is an indicator that they are very interested in knowing.
Well, that breaks all kind of rules that I've lived by for 45 years, but and DOE would get all upset if you did that under a DOE contract.
Perhaps, but not under state contract law.
Well, I don't know about that either. So I believe we ought to chair this. I'd like to talk to Hobie. If you want to take a vote now, we can take a vote.
Well, I mean, I guess I can ask for a motion, and if I don't get a motion, then we can certainly, I guess, Michael, one thing that I have a question for you is, what's the timeline for this master service agreement? Is another 2 weeks tabling it going to be problematic, or?
Well, there's two proximate issues that we need our engineer. There's several projects that we need to get them engaged with. One is the moving of the anemometer. The second is the fuel tank, and there's some others. But I think the more important one is that this is the time period every year where we work with the FAA and the state of Oregon Department of Aviation to true up the CIP list. And there's certain deadlines for that. So for the committee recommended this contract with a different engineer. It would be time to get them up to speed, oriented, and working together on anticipating
Understandable.
the CIP list. And that's a timeline we're under right now.
Okay. I mean, I guess I can ask for a motion in a second, and if I don't get it, then we'll have to table it. But would this be something that Commissioner Fox and Garen, could we maybe have these conversations to make Commissioner Fox feel more comfortable very quickly, and then we could call a quick special meeting before our next meeting so that the timeline, am I making sense?
That sounds reasonable to me. If Commissioner Fox wants to meet with Commissioner Strike in the next couple days, and I'm available for a special meeting.
Okay.
That's what it takes to get it approved.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Mike. Do you know where Hobie is? I just tried to call him.
I wouldn't want to disclose in a public session,
All right.
but he's out of town.
Could you email me where he is so I can try him again?
Sure.
If there's an alternate phone number. And I don't want to delay this, but I do want to have a talk with him.
Yeah. And like
yeah.
I said, Commissioner Fox, I was concerned because of this selection and having it be a change that I did reach out to Michael and Genevieve, and both of them agreed that Commissioner Strike was very okay with this being an action item.
Okay. Well, give me tomorrow to see if I can get a hold of them, and we can go from there. This could be a very short meeting.
Okay. Then I guess with that direction, Michael, is it okay for us to table this, and you can give feedback to Precision Approach that we're going to be acting on this very soon with a special meeting?
We'll do so.
Thank you.
Okay. So action item C is tabled at the moment, and Then next, I guess we didn't have any directives, so we don't really need to, staff directives. So we don't really need to do our new agenda item. But is there any commission call? Anyone have anything that they want to say? Commissioner Garrett.
I just realized that Daryl isn't smiling the entire time. That was a picture. Daryl, put your picture back up. There we go.
Commissioner Fox.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Is there any other items that we need to discuss?
Nope.
Well, with that, then I guess we can adjourn at 6:31. Good job.